So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. I'm delighted to see so many of you here as passionate as Uptree are about tackling barriers young people from low socioeconomic backgrounds have in securing an apprenticeship. Welcome and thanks to our keynote employer and apprentice speakers who we'll meet shortly. For those of you I've not met before, my name is Mel and I'm the Head of Partnerships at Uptree. And for those of you who are not familiar with Uptree, we help employers connect with students that wouldn't otherwise reach, improving social mobility and strengthening those early talent pipelines. And for the past 10 years, we've been bridging the gap between education and employment for those students from underserved and low socioeconomic backgrounds. We work closely with top employers to demystify apprenticeships and pipeline diverse talent into their roles, with our ultimate vision being to put an end to inequality. We provide accessible careers information on the breadth of industries, roles and pathways available to them, and also provide them with those invaluable work experience opportunities. And my own journey into this space started in education. So I worked in schools in London and Kent for over 25 years. And as a former director of sixth form and careers lead, I've obviously seen the apprenticeship route kind of slowly grow and sort of gain that traction. Although I have to be really honest and sort of the first to admit that myself and I'm sure many teachers were very much guilty of championing the university route because it was kind of the known route to us and a known quantity. And there was a real safety in providing those resources and time to university applications because we probably weren't as informed about the alternative routes as we should be. Even today, as we see those, the interest in apprenticeships is climbing all of the time, the understanding of those routes still remains unsatisfactory for many sort of students, parents and teachers. We still hear students at events saying, I'm not applying to level 3 apprenticeships because I'm already doing A levels, which they see as being level 3. And again, I'm guilty of, I did advise students that only a few years ago. So there is still a real education, sort of piece around apprenticeships. And with degree apprenticeships, again, hearing things like, I want to do a degree apprenticeship because I don't want to go to university. And obviously there is an irony to that. There is still a significant knowledge gap regarding those levels, the format of study and what work-based learning actually looks like. And in sort of conjunction with that, the feedback we're getting from our employer partners suggests that despite there being more information available than ever before, and with AI supporting students through those sort of initial recruitment stages, which has definitely seen an increase in the volume of applications from low socioeconomic background students, those from the most underserved backgrounds are still falling behind. One of our partners recently described these students as having sort of the furthest to come up the curve. And we consistently hear that while AI is helping students progress through those early screening stages, it can't replace the commercial awareness, social capital, and that inherent confidence that often becomes the deciding factor at the assessment centre or interview stage. And this is where we see significant fallout of that low socioeconomic background talent from the process. Now, the issue of access is a national priority. The government has made it clear that they believe apprenticeships are a vehicle for social mobility, with Bridget Phillipson, the Secretary of State for Education, recently saying, growing the economy and opportunity for all are fundamental issues. We are determined to support apprentices to ensure growth and training opportunities extend to all. So it is, very much part of their overarching mission for the UK. So we know that apprenticeships are a key vehicle for social mobility, yet for students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, the path to entry remains really complex. Today's discussion focuses on identifying and removing the barriers in attraction and recruitment to ensure equal access to these life-changing apprenticeship opportunities. Shortly, we're going to learn about the current landscape of social mobility and apprenticeships from our keynote speaker, Robbie Cruikshanks. And then we'll move on to our employer and apprentice panel, exploring their first-hand experiences with attraction and recruitment. And then we'll open the floor to audience Q&A. Our goal today is really for everyone to depart. I think whenever I sort of attend a webinar, we'll go do a training session, if I can take one, takeaway from that, I felt it's been valuable. So really, I want you to have one takeaway that we can action or influence within our own organisations to chip away at those barriers that are preventing low socioeconomic background talent into our professions. I'm excited now to hand over to Robbie, who's our keynote speaker, to introduce himself, explain his role and share his research and insights into the role apprenticeships are or maybe aren't playing in social mobility in the UK. Over to you, Robbie. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mel, and thanks again for Uptree for having me here and for all of you for coming along. A bit about me, I'm Robbie Cruikshanks. I'm a senior researcher at the Education Policy Institute. We're a data-driven, independent research charity focused on ensuring all children, but especially those from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds, can get the best education possible. And my research focus at the moment is on higher education and further education, and apprenticeships are playing a larger and larger role in that, as Mel outlined, particularly in the government strategy, but also as we're seeing in the news at the moment, with so much information or concern around the value of university that provides to our young people, and how apprenticeships at all levels can kind of fill that role in helping social mobility. And just before I get onto some of the evidence, I think it's really important, and thank you to Uptree for kind of focusing on that social mobility angle. I think it's something we think about instinctively a lot when it comes to apprenticeships, but it's definitely something that needs to be the focus when you look at historically the pathways to higher education and really how entrenched some of these inequalities are. So if we could just go to the next slide, please. So I thought I'd start with some positive news, at least before we get on some of the barriers and challenges, which is that the evidence and the data really strongly supports the idea that apprenticeships support social mobility. I think we have a folk understanding of this, as I say there, that kind of practical earning and learning alternative that might serve people who historically, maybe in their family or their areas, haven't accessed university. But yeah, the evidence is there that, in fact, the wage premium, so the additional wage, benefited over doing an alternative lower level qualification. That wage premium for apprenticeships is statistically significant, and even more important, these premia are stronger for disadvantaged students. So there's a greater benefit that disadvantaged students get from studying apprenticeships than their non-disadvantaged peers. And this is something that is kind of quite unique a lot in education settings, that it can be so advantageous to disadvantaged students when their peers maybe don't see the same effect. So there really is a lot of potential here to get. And now I'll just dive into some of the barriers that we're seeing in terms of realising that potential. So a lot of you might be aware of the kind of history of participation and perhaps the way that hasn't gone so well in the past decade or so. But we saw this rise in apprenticeships during the coalition government around 2010, 2011. There was increases in funding there, but there was also a kind of broadening of that scope of apprenticeships, particularly among older people. There was a big rise in uptake there. Around 2017, we saw the apprenticeship levy introduced, a kind of different funding system for apprenticeships, and that led to a pretty precipitous fall in apprenticeship starts. And there's an absolute range of factors of why that is, and that could be an entirely different discussion. But needless to say, the apprenticeship levy hasn't quite worked out in terms of driving that increased participation that both young people and employers really want to see to meet that social mobility potential and also fill the skills gaps in our economy. So we still haven't quite got back to that pre-levy status in terms of participation, but there is some work to do to get there. Sadly, that participation trend has hit young disadvantaged people the hardest. You can see on my chart on the right there, that's the share of apprenticeship starts taken by under 19s. So those people that otherwise perhaps might have gone to university or pursued a high level qualification. That's decreased in the last 5 or 6 years or so. And as I said, that's hit disadvantaged students the hardest. There's been a 36% decline in the last few years or so among apprenticeship starts from disadvantaged backgrounds. And at the same time, we've seen a kind of growth in apprenticeship starts from those among older learners and those from non-disadvantaged backgrounds. So a lot of that social mobility potential is kind of getting mopped up by learners who maybe they're retraining in some conditions, or they could have accessed university, but they're seeing the potential in terms of wage and career benefits that apprenticeships can have. And we really need to support disadvantaged young people to be able to access those. Next slide, please. And then more recently, degree apprenticeships. So the kind of newest, maybe addition to our apprenticeship suite. I recently conducted some research on how inclusive these have been, particularly, again, they've been framed from the start as a way of an alternative to university study that young people can access. Again, with that real social mobility framing in mind from the very start of these standards being rolled out. And what I found was that there are some really, really strong returns to these degree apprenticeships. I think a stat from the report suggesting that just 1 year after completing a degree apprenticeship, the average degree apprenticeship wage outstrips that of the average graduate around 10 years after they graduate. So almost immediately upon completing that degree apprentice gets some really strong returns. Now, the downside here is that these degree apprenticeships seem at this stage to be far from the kind of inclusivity that we would hope. And in fact, degree apprenticeships appear even less inclusive when we're talking about socioeconomic disadvantage than even some of the most selective universities, those Russell Group universities that are kind of considered really high quality and providing strong returns and strong education for their students. So there's a real access gap here, right even at the top of those high level apprenticeships, and those are the ones that can see the strongest returns and then therefore the strongest benefits for social mobility. So where are these barriers? If you could go to the next slide, you won't be surprised to hear that they start in a lot of cases right at the application stage, and in some cases even before. Some data here from the Sutton Trust around apprentices, disadvantaged apprentices, were they likely to find their desired career information at similar rates to their non-disadvantaged peers? What kind of support are they getting for their applications, whether that's to university or to their degree apprenticeships? So there's real, as Mel outlined at the start, those knowledge barriers in what the level of awareness is around the options available to them and the benefits of doing an apprenticeship, but also in the actual support to do that apprenticeship and make that application as strong as it can be. And then it doesn't stop there. Once apprentices make it onto their apprenticeship, we see completion and outcome gaps between non-disadvantaged and disadvantaged learners, kind of at all stages and at all levels. And the headline here, I won't ask you to interpret these coefficients too much, but the headline here is that apprentices from disadvantaged backgrounds are just overall significantly less likely to achieve and complete their qualification at all levels across all genders. And that is something that's really disappointing, that these young people have spent so much effort and so much time getting onto this course, and for, again, a variety of reasons in that that sequence of study, they're falling out and they're not managing to complete that course and get the qualification and then the benefits associated with that they need. Now on to some of the more promising news. So I've kind of outlined here a lot of the challenges around those barriers and the real sad state we kind of find ourselves in when it comes to participation and access. That's evidence that's kind of very well cemented. We know a lot about that now, and the fact that there's a lot more we could be doing to encourage access and participation. But there's increasingly emerging evidence on what's working to do this for disadvantaged students and students from underserved backgrounds. And I've kind of structured these into, I think, 3 real key areas to address a lot of these barriers that we see. And the first one I'm sure we'll hear from our employers shortly is around employer outreach. There's really strong evidence around intensive and particularly sector-specific outreach that increases that application profile from disadvantaged applicants. And that can come in a number of ways, but I think the key takeaway there is that it should be really focused on what is the apprentice looking for? What information do they want to know? And we find out from survey data that's most often the basics. It's salaries, it's grade requirements, it's what will the apprenticeship look like. It's something that disadvantaged apprentices might not have a fantastic knowledge of. They might not have support network around them to lean on as to information on their apprenticeship. So just going that extra mile and saying what this will actually involve, what the benefits will be to this specific sector or this specific apprenticeship, what it might look like, and almost envisioning their journey for them before application can go a long way. Similarly, we've got these kind of early trials working on pre-employment programs, and I think the evidence I've seen a lot has been kind of focused in the healthcare sector, but this idea around pre-entry support, and once an apprentice has applied and has got their place, onboarding them kind of on a rolling basis before they even start their apprenticeship, because that transition period, we know, all the way through an educational journey, but particularly upon leaving school and going to apprenticeship, can be really challenging. It's a new environment, a workplace that they might not be familiar with, lots of people of different ages that they won't have had potentially a lot of time working with. So that pre-entry support that can come in the form of work experience and open days and meeting the team, pre-entry tasks and things like that, and coming alongside that structured onboarding, once they're actually in position, seems to show some good evidence on improving short-term retention. So ensuring that apprentices aren't falling off once they've accessed and have started their apprenticeship, that they're supported to keep going and start to see some of these benefits in the workplace. And then lastly, ongoing throughout all of this is the importance of support and mentoring. And again, strong evidence here on kind of broad inclusive workplace practices, but particularly mentoring being really strongly linked with improved retention, particularly for disadvantaged people. And again, that kind of makes, I think, intuitive sense to a lot of us, that if particularly disadvantaged apprentices can see role models like them in the workplace, they are people to emulate, they can see that path again unfolding out of them for a career they see for themselves in the future, that can be really effective in increasing retention, particularly in the short term. But then also there's the wider piece around inclusivity in the workplace. And that comes with benefits for kind of all young workers. And that's encouraging open practice, honest practice, and a real understanding of the kind of issues facing young people and helping to address those with an open mind. So really strong evidence on what works. It's difficult to implement, I'm sure, but I think it's really promising that some of these early studies and pilot schemes have shown such promising results. And just to finish off before I hand over to my employers, I think there's a way to see the journey of disadvantaged apprentices, sadly almost as a kind of a leaky bucket, that at each stage of this process we are losing disadvantaged apprentices at each stage, and that's a tragedy. So I think I've broken it down into these separate stages and what we need to focus on at each stage. So it starts with awareness, like I mentioned at the start, making sure that young disadvantaged apprentices are aware of the options available to them, of the alternatives to university. That's careers, advice and guidance, and government and policy can play a role in that, but absolutely so can employers and schools and colleges. Through to application, personally, I think my policy proposal here would be improving the kind of application process that exists out there in terms of a national application portal, increasing the guidance that's available for apprenticeships. We have UCAS for university graduates, and that's something that has worked quite effectively in terms of increasing participation. Let's see something similar when it comes to apprenticeships. When it comes to recruitment, I'd like to see some kind of contextual incentives rather. So what are the benefits that employers might see beyond in the workplace, but in terms of their financial situation for recruiting apprentices from underserved backgrounds? And also looking at the policy around selection criteria. What qualifications do apprentices need to access their course, and what alternatives could there be outside that traditional GCSE A-level framework? When it comes to retention, we mentioned just before in the previous slide about those onboarding programs and that pre-entry support. That's really important, as that's a key stage where a lot of disadvantaged apprentices tend to fall off. And then on to progression with evidence-based mentoring. And really my plea to government would be kind of broader and much stronger financial support for apprentices. Again, we have quite a strong, it could go further, but a strong level of support in terms of maintenance loans for university students. Where are those for apprentices? I know there are various bursaries and grants, but that could be made a lot clearer and go a lot further. And then again, where are those incentives for employers? Is there a policy lever we can pull there in encouraging employers to really push those apprentices on towards further progression? So the action across here is really needed at every single level, at every single stage, from employers, from government and from policymakers, and from schools and colleges. So thanks very much for listening. I really appreciate the time to be able to set out some of this evidence, and I'm really interested to hear from some of our employers and apprentices on their experiences and how some of this might resonate with what they see as some of these solutions to tackling these barriers. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Robbie. Excuse me. It is really eye-opening, isn't it, to see that disparity in applications, the support at the starts and the completion for young people from low socioeconomic backgrounds. It does seem to suggest that the apprenticeships aren't being the intended vehicle for social mobility, and also gives us a bit of context around, maybe why social mobility generally is stagnating. As you said, it would be a really nice opportunity now to sort of lead into the panel discussion, handing over to our employer first. So we're going to really hear about their experiences and the practices in relation to that sort of attraction to a apprenticeship piece, and then the recruitment. Obviously, I'm sure touching on some of the points that Robbie's said there. So if I can first just pass over just for each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and if we could go John first, then David, then Glory, then Renee, that would be amazing. Thank you. John.
Thanks, Mel. So, hey everyone, thanks for having us along today. My name's John Banks. I work in the next generation talent team at Lloyds Banking Group. So I lead our technical education and early careers pathways, which include apprenticeships, T-levels, and our wider social mobility partnerships as well. And a big part of my role is making sure we can create accessible, high quality routes into the group for people from all backgrounds. That's me, Mel.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks, Mel, John. So, David Morrison, cybersecurity apprentice at Lloyds Bank Group with John. Software engineer is my kind of official day job, and I'm working within insider detection. So, anything kind of cybersec related, if you're interested in that kind of route, then I'd love to hear some questions.
Thanks, David. And then Glory.
Hi everyone, so I'm Glory. I work at KPMG. I'm a first year apprentice. I work within audit, and then my department is transactions assurance. So yeah, I came straight from school. And if you have any questions, let me know. Yeah.
Thank you. And then finally, Renee.
Hello, good morning everyone. My name is Renee. I currently work at Coca-Cola. This is my second year. And day to day, I am a sales associate, so I'd visit different accounts, independent shops like restaurants, pubs, cafes, and try and help them with their marketing and increase customers.
Thanks so much, guys. So yeah, we're going to start by discussing the sort of attraction piece. So John, if I can come to you first. So what specific and measurable steps have Lloyds Banking Group taken to actively target and build those relationships with schools, communities and partners that serve young people from low socioeconomic backgrounds?
Yeah, thanks, Mel. I think first of all, it's probably worth stating we haven't got it cracked. So despite us being a large organisation, we're learning all the time and constantly evolving, if you like. But what we do is we take a really deliberate approach to widening participation. We know how important it is to connect students with opportunities that they mightn't have access to, particularly in the corporate world. And one thing that's really key for us are partnerships. So working with organisations like Uptree and others, we've got a few different social mobility partners help us reach students that we just might not get the access to. Have we not kind of had those interventions and those routes into access to those students? And then through workshops, mentoring, which Robbie's touched on earlier, and maybe build on that a little bit more. With different events, we've got a goal of pretty much improving confidence and awareness. I think awareness is just so important. And one of the quotes from earlier was just even the basics for these young people can just go such a long way. But then I think in terms of impact, our T-level program is probably a good example of things that we've done well in this space, if you like. So I saw Kelly came on into the chat at the start from Wales. So T-level is obviously not applicable for Wales, Kelly, but bear with me because we have kind of equivalent initiatives, if you like. But we partner with 14 different colleges in 6 different regions. And that continues to rise for us year on year. So last year we delivered 140 work placements for 16 to 19-year-olds across our 6 hubs. And we see half of those students then progressing onto apprenticeships with us. So that's us working in collaboration with education, getting young people an opportunity to see our environment, and then building a route into apprenticeship progression, which something we're really proud of and something that we're continuing to evolve as well. And then just one of the things just to mention in terms of our outreach, and this will lead to a bit of an open invite, but we reached over 120,000 young people last year through national events, skills programs. We've got this thing called Lloyd's Careers Live. So Mel, this isn't intended as a Lloyd's Careers Live plug, but every first Tuesday of every month we'll do like a chosen specialist subject topic. So 1 month in January it could be how to conduct the right application, or to hear from an apprentice who successfully navigates an assessment process. We then might have a deep dive on a particular subject like cyber or whatever it might be. But if you have a look at Lloyd's Careers Live, brilliant opportunity. We have about 2,000 or 3,000 students on us every month, just coming to kind of hear from us inside the business, and more importantly some of our apprentices. So that outreach will continue. We're hoping to stretch that to 125,000 plus this coming year.
Thanks, John. And just for a bit of context for our relationship, so I've had the pleasure of working with John since September, with Lloyds Bank for a couple of years before that. And what's fantastic about our partnership is that Lloyds are always looking to evolve in what they're doing and innovate. So just this year, John sort of put a program together that kind of takes students on a journey through the application process, which we're already starting to see sort of reap the benefits of. So it is that constant sort of evolution of what we're doing in the sort of social mobility space, and really thinking about the needs of those students. So and the Careers Live is really popular with our students as well. Thanks, John. That's really, really insightful. So in terms of now maybe getting the apprentice view in terms of the attraction piece. So Daisy, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay. In terms of apprenticeships, how did you find out about the apprenticeships, and what informed your decision on going down that route, and then the companies that you applied to?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So in my school, we had a team for developing the young workforce, and it was actually recommended to me that I go to one of the events hosted by Uptree to kind of stand out within my UCAS application, because I was looking to try and stand out in that sense from my peers in the school. So I went to one of those events and I actually really, really enjoyed it. And then I ended up going to 3 of the events. So what I'd really say is that I'd rave about the in-person Uptree events. So I know that it's an online one, but if you do get a chance to go to an in-person one, please take the opportunity to do that. So I'd done that, and then through that I'd kind of spoken to some of the people who work in Lloyds, since I'd been there a few times, and just built like a wee bit of an informal network. And then as a result of that, and speaking to them and speaking to the people who were also going to the events, I'd kind of put 2 and 2 together that for me specifically, and there's different routes for everyone, but for me, I'd much prefer this route. So I'd found that to be my kind of segue in, and it was definitely really, really helpful in applying to Lloyds, because you're able to say that you've been to these events and you're proactively doing it. It's really about like the interest when you've got it kind of in like your playing field. So I'd definitely say that if you do have the opportunity to do that, to definitely take advantage of it while you've got it.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting to see how actually your decision making was almost changed, completely from that sort of uni route to apprenticeship. So thank you. Glory, how about yourself? How did you find out about apprenticeships, and what helped you make those decisions?
Yeah, I'll add on from David's point about the Uptree events and all. I think for me in particular, I just started in year 12, going towards the end of year 12, I was kind of lost in terms of what I wanted to do. I wasn't satisfied with the whole university route, but I had no other idea what other routes were out there. And for me, I was just thinking, okay, let me build on some experience. So I went on Google and I was like, oh, finance experiences for year 12s. And the first thing that came up was Uptree. And I know I'd seen it on LinkedIn a few times because I set up my LinkedIn account. And then I signed up for an event at UBS. That was my first Uptree in-person event. It was a masterclass. And when I went to that event, the people were lovely, the Uptree staff were lovely. But it was a masterclass for apprenticeships. And I was like, wow, this is something that resonates well with me. They really explained not only what an apprenticeship was, but the application process. They broke it down. We got tips. And just having that experience on my CV, adding on to David's point, it makes you stand out in application processes because other than just having that on your CV, you actually have skills that you can explain and you have confidence as well. You know how to socialize in the corporate sphere, you know how to talk to people, collaborate, network. So yeah, that's definitely helped me.
Thank you so much. I feel like people are going to think we've paid you to say about Uptree events. Honestly, we haven't. Renee, over to yourself.
Yeah, to piggyback on what David and Glory just said, yeah, the Uptree events definitely made me more aware and knowledgeable about apprenticeships. When I was about 16, you hear everyone say that they want to do apprenticeship, but you don't. Well, I didn't really understand what that looked like. So going to the Uptree like masterclasses, speaking to the people that work there, really added, I'll tell you, a lot of knowledge about apprenticeships, so that when applying, I actually had something to go off, rather than just applying without any knowledge of what I'm doing and what I'm going into.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone for sharing. It's really helpful and insightful. I'm just going to stay with the apprentice voice for a second, but sort of switch the focus from the attraction to apprenticeships, but more about the barriers that you may have faced in actually applying and obviously securing an apprenticeship. So, Gloria, if I can come to you first on this one, what did you find were the main challenges when applying, and then what sort of support were you able to receive from sort of home, your school, or employers?
I would definitely say one of the barriers was the lack of awareness. I know from the school I came from, it was very rare to say you were doing an apprenticeship. And because that was something I knew I wanted to do, when I was speaking about it, it was often turned down of, that's a bit risky. Or I think there was one time someone made a comment saying that's a bit over ambitious when I said the kind of companies I wanted to work for, like the big four. But I knew like if I work hard, I'll try and get it. So I think that's one of the perceptions. It's like, oh, that's overambitious. But yeah, in terms of, was your question about how I overcame those barriers?
And just maybe the support you got from either from
Yeah,
home or school
yeah.
or employers.
Yeah, I remember I was speaking with my parents and they were like, sure, if that's what you want to do, just make sure you work hard and all. And I just made sure I was like being proactive as well, ensuring that I was making the most of resources that if my school couldn't provide places like Uptree, young professionals, anything in person, just trying to get as much work experience and just going to all the insight days, just trying to broaden my exposure of apprenticeships so that I can go to these applications, I can go to like interviews and really have confidence, especially if I can't get that confidence from school systems.
Yeah, it really saddens me. Obviously, it's the next teacher to say that, but schools, and this is not a slur on schools because they are under-resourced, and obviously they just haven't got the time and resource to be upskilled. So, hopefully that's something that is been changed with some of the the changes in policy and the sort of developments in the Gatsby benchmarks and so on. Thanks for sharing that, Glory. Renee, how about yourself in terms of the main challenges that you experienced applying for apprenticeships and support that you received?
Yeah, I'd say quite similar as well. I'd say lack of knowledge and awareness from my school, but it wasn't too bad because they did lead us to Uptree. So I remember when I told some of my teachers that I was applying for Coca-Cola, it was as if they were like, oh, like, yeah, as Gloria said, like, that's a bit ambitious. And then when I told them, yeah, it's almost like they didn't believe me. But Yeah, I think overcoming it through going to events definitely increased my knowledge and awareness. Yeah.
And then in terms of just sort of support from home, was there people at home that can kind of were familiar with that pathway or that could give you any sort of specific sort of guidance?
Not really, but my mum used to work at university, so she was just really helped me with my application. I remember when I was doing like the video assessment and I wasn't looking at the camera. She was telling me you have to look at the camera. So in that sense, yeah, I got some support in the application process.
Amazing. And I think that just shines a light on the importance of, what we think might be simple things, like looking at the camera in a video interview. But, these aren't necessarily things that are shared with, with lots of students, particularly if they've not got, that sort of professional network that has that insight. Thanks, Renee. David, how about yourselves? What did you find were the sort of challenges when applying and the support that you received?
Yeah, so I'd ditto what both Gloria and Renee have already said. But one of the challenges for me, big time, was confidence. Like I wasn't really hugely confident in speaking out and also confident in what I was saying. Like in the assessment centre, I can't remember what my question was, but it's like you got given some information, then you had to present on it. But I didn't have that kind of backbone in me. So I'd definitely say that that was a challenge. But just going to these events and speaking to people who are your age, but it's outside like the kind of friend comfort zone that you've got in school. Like you're in an environment, you've got to present yourself well. It's having that can really, really help. But one thing that I did differ on, and it's kind of sidetracking from the question about challenges, but I was actually really, really fortunate in that, see, my year head, he was really, really kind. So he didn't really understand like everything about the apprenticeships in that sense. But what he was doing was he was supporting you. And he was like, if you've had the decision on what you wanted to do, then he would try and help you to do that. So I'd definitely say that, see if there is someone, and again, I was really fortunate to have that person, but if there is someone in your school that you think would be able to help you with that, like, try and get them to help. A lot of teachers, while it is their day job to teach, but they will be willing to go that extra mile to help you out. So I'd definitely say just kind of try and find someone that you can trust and even practice things with, like your pastoral care teacher or something like that.
Thanks, David, and thanks for sharing that. I think that obviously that sort of almost goes back to what Robbie was saying about that sort of support and mentor piece. That was kind of once you started the apprenticeship, but that can definitely start, in schools prior to that for the application process, definitely. Obviously, we've got hit on things there like lack of knowledge, confidence, maybe sort of differing support from home and school. So knowing those challenges, John, coming back to you as sort of the employer with that focus on apprenticeships, how have you built your kind of recruitment processes to be, as simple as fair as possible, and making sure that every high potential applicant has a real chance regardless of their backgrounds and the support they're getting?
Sorry to jump in here. We've just got another 5 minutes before we open up to Q&A, so just to let you guys know.
Perfect. I think thanks, Jared.
You're just trying to put me off my question, aren't you?
I was going to say, do you want me to repeat it, John?
No, I know
good.
we're talking about how we allow that access for applicants. So first of all, I guess we've designed our process very much to focus on potential as opposed to privilege. So while some of our programs do have a certain level of academic qualification that's a requisite for the role, that isn't the case for all programs, and some of our apprenticeships don't have any qualifications at all attached, which is quite deliberate and obviously means we can widen participation right at the outset. But as you get into the process, our interviews are strengths-based. We have structured assessor guides to make sure we try and take bias out of the equation. So if you think of an agent workforce and people kind of looking for people like themselves, that's something that we're very deliberate about right the way through the process. We use contextual indicators like free school meals to make sure that we've got fair progression right through the stages, and we review that with our recruitment partner year on year to make sure that there is that transparency and there's that fairness of progression, not just at application stage, but right through each of the assessment hurdles. But the bit that excites me the most, and we might pick up on some of this in the Q&A, is what happens before you even get there, and that's where our partnership with Uptree comes to life. So we run sessions alongside Uptree that explicitly help with that readiness. So A couple of my favourites are Acing the Application and an application masterclass, where we bring students in. We have pretty much a full day of almost mock assessment centre, or certainly we're talking through the things that are involved and role playing some of those activities in a safe environment, which I think just, in my opinion, really help people set up. And I think some of Robbie's research probably evidences that people will have better outcomes as a result of that type of intervention. And then just I'll come back to the T-levels example just finally, Mel, if I may, just in terms of how we've tweaked this is really recently our traditional application routes. So we've had students with us for a 10-week work placement, and over the course of that time they've obviously got to know us as an organisation. We've got to know them. We've got to see brilliant amounts of potential, but these are still 16 and 17-year-olds. But when we did our first iteration of our T-level placements, we saw these bright young people coming in, and we fast-tracked some of these students to our final stage of assessment centre. This is going back 5 years ago now. And what we learned from that is those students didn't succeed at the assessment centre. So they performed at a level, but not at the benchmark level. I think there's a question gone into the Q&A about the competition for apprenticeships, and it is super, super high. But we've tweaked the process on the back of that. So we said, well, hang on a minute. If these are young people entering the world of assessments where you're up against, graduates or career changers or whoever's in that hiring pool. But we've seen these people for 10 weeks kind of in the flesh. We've seen what they've delivered in the workplace. So instead of fast tracking to assessment centre the following year, we shifted it for a line manager endorsement of that student to make an automatic offer on the strength of them having a great work placement with us and proving their potential. So the thing is, the word we used earlier was evolution. I think that's probably us as an organisation learning about what hasn't worked and trying to do something different, which is particularly helping people from lower socioeconomic background.
Yeah, thank you, John. That's really insightful, and I know that sort of fast tracking piece is something that's come up a few times with yourself and other partners, and it's sort of trying to make it open access, but obviously not unfair to then others. But I think that is a really powerful, and it is that performance piece. Often students from low social backgrounds are not used to being in those environments where they've kind of got to perform, and it relates back to David, your point about confidence, and just that sort of cultural capital that they potentially get from home. Conscious, I'm sure there's lots of questions to get onto, so I'm going to hand over to Jared, if that's okay, for our first question from the audience.
Yeah, sure. So, John, you actually touched on what that question is, but it's a question from Sonia Christensen. How can we help young people secure apprenticeships? The competition is so high. I know you touched on that, but if you could expand on that further, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely believe it's just giving those opportunities at the earliest possible points that we can. The reason when I was asked that first question about how employers can succeed in this space, it is through partnerships. So for us, we couldn't get access to these young people without Uptree or other social mobility partners to open the network. But what we do have as an employer, and hopefully this kind of helps Sonia, if you like, is we've got a suite of different options, whether it's a one-day experience option, whether it's a micro experience, whether it's a 1 hour virtual session or something like the Lloyd's Careers Live. But the whole point of it is it's early intervention and talking through what the assessment centre process looks like, but not me talking it through, because I'm of a certain age. But when we've got David and Gloria and Renee on today talking about it, that's what I think young people need to hear from people who are right at the start of their career, but have mastered the process, been successful at the process, and can kind of role model how to get through.
Just to come in quickly on that from a kind of policy perspective, I think a large part of what could be done is supporting more small and medium enterprises with taking on apprenticeships, as particularly, outside of London, there's a lot of disadvantaged students in these areas where there aren't large businesses with kind of more expansive and more conscious social mobility apprenticeship programs, like some of the employers we've heard about today. So I think there are some financial levers that government could be pulling a bit more there in terms of those incentives that I mentioned. Because at the moment, a lot of small businesses, I think, could find it quite both difficult to navigate the almost bureaucracy of the apprenticeship system and the levy system, but also to see that immediate return on investment that they're kind of after, in a way that a large business might be able to think a little bit more long term and see the value of these apprentices over a longer period in their career. Those smaller companies, I think, need just that little nudge to get some returns a little bit quicker.
It's a good point, Rob. I mean, I guess I know this is the small employer, large employer debates. How we help that with that as a large employer is we use our levy transfer. So, you know, I think since 2019, we've given away 27 million quid's worth of levy funding to SMEs, which is great. But your point is, how do you disturb that demand? So it's took us a hell of a long time to get to that figure. And kind of the first few years of levy transfer, we were constantly trying to disturb that man and get the message out there. And it's probably still, you know, there's more that can be done to make sure that it's known as a proposition for those smaller firms who find it a bit more difficult.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm going to hand over to our panel of apprentices now, actually. And we've kind of answered this question, but it'd be good to hear it again. So, question to the panel. Did you find there was much support and advice in your school for the apprenticeship route you wanted to take, or did you have to find out about it yourself? I know you've probably answered this one, but just for the purpose of answering this question, it'd be great if we could again. Anyone want to take this one, handle this one, or do you want me to pick someone?
I'm happy to take this one.
Brilliant.
So for me, it was something that everyone was aware of, but it was traditionally for roles in construction and that kind of apprenticeship route, but it wasn't the kind of cybersecurity route or a tech apprenticeship. That was kind of unheard of. It was mainly you would go to uni, you would do software engineering or whatever you wanted to do, computer science, and then you would go into the job. And in all fairness, I also wasn't aware. I was kind of blindsided by it, but then when I found out that it was there, the support was there. So I think that it's if you can do your research just now, and it will shift with time, like as awareness becomes more apparent. Just now, I'd say that if you can do your research and find things and then ask for the support, you'd be putting yourself in a really good position. It's not going to kind of get handed to you in that sense just now.
Love that. Thank you. Any of our other apprentices wanted to build on that one?
Yeah, I think I'll add on that. Almost on David's point, closed mouths don't get fed, just making sure that you take the initiative as well. I think with the apprenticeship route as a whole, what I've noticed from my experience, and I think I can speak on behalf of other apprentices, is very self-motivated. Knowing you have to know that you want it and just try your best. And with opportunities at school, I think it's almost like if your school isn't that aware, you can be the exposure that your school gets with the whole apprenticeship route as well. I think I noticed that within my school, as soon as I started telling people, oh, I'm applying for an apprenticeship, etc. I think more people were researching it, and teachers and the recruitment team in my school as well. I think they were doing their own research as well into it. So yeah, I think it's just about being self-motivated as well.
Brilliant, love that. Closed mouths don't get fed. I love that one. I'm going to hand over to the panel of apprentices again, but I'd love, John, your insight, and Robbie, if you can jump in on this one as well. But have any of the panel relocated to take up the apprenticeship role? If so, what were the challenges with relocation? David, yeah, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yes, so I haven't individually relocated, but one of my best mates who's in Edinburgh just now, I'm Edinburgh based, he relocated from Bristol to move up to Edinburgh, and his parents are over in Cyprus now, so he's completely on his own, which sounds crazy, but it depends on the employer and the university for it, but he's actually staying in student accommodation as an apprentice. So if you look into that, there are renting options as well, because as an apprentice you'll be making decent money, depending on kind of employer. But yeah, so definitely it is an option to look into student accommodation if it is allowed within that university and with your current employer. It sounds really scary, like it's a big move to move away from the city that you know, but it's really, really interesting too though.
Yeah, it's big and scary. But John, you must have some experience of apprentices relocating for opportunities.
Yeah, speaking of, I think David might know this, but the chap he's chatting about is one of our T-level students. So it's actually quite nice to join the dots and show that this isn't just words that I'm giving you. So he was offered a role in Bristol as a software engineer, but his passion was cybersecurity, and the cybersecurity team are based up in Edinburgh, hence the relocation. So that's how it came about in the first place. But huge challenges, and you know, bank of mum and dad is great if you've got it. but not everybody has access to that. So some of the schemes that we try and put in place, we do like a rental deposit loan, which helps. I think it's a £1,500 initiative where you can get your first month's rent and your deposit paid for up front through the organisation, interest-free loan, and then it's kind of deducted from salary. So there's financial tools like that we've got to help. Again, we're a really large organisation, and I suspect most SMEs won't have something in play like that. I think more practically what we can do, again, we're learning from this all the time, is where we see young people relocate particularly, it's probably moving out the family home for the first time, probably don't have the experience of graduates who might have moved away to university. So we try and draw on our alumni almost of apprentices that have trodden that path in the first place. So we've got an internal kind of band called Aspire, and it's our previous cohort of graduates and apprentices and T-level students who've come a few hundred yards down the line, and they will talk about what they look for in terms of the best place to live in the city, type of things you need to be on the lookout when you're renting a house for the first time, being really cute with your deposit and making sure that you're inspecting the property, all really practical stuff. So I think there's a lot of softer stuff that can be done as well as the financial side.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Just interest of time, I'm going to try and squeeze 2 more questions because there was quite a few, but I would get those in here. And again, this was probably for our panel, but could I ask the panel if access to technology to make apprentice and job applications ever an issue? Do schools and colleges have these resources available to you? So I'll ask that to our panel, and maybe Robbie, there might be something from a policy angle you could potentially answer on that one as well. Renee, do you fancy taking this one?
Yes, in regards to technology, if he's talking about like access to like devices, like maybe computers, I would say it's not really an issue. I think most companies make it quite easy for you to do it on a simple computer. So if that means you maybe going to the library, you using your school computer, I think yes, it can be done 100%.
Any of our other apprentices want to handle that one?
Yeah, I'll take that. I think certain applications, if you even had issues with devices and all, I think you could make it known and they were like allowed some circumstances. So yeah, just making sure you reach out as well if you do have issues to the companies you're applying to, if you're struggling with technology. But schools as well, I'm pretty sure, yeah, like Renee said, they're very accessible to do the applications, like the video applications and all. Transferring your CV with PDF form. Yeah, I think all that was quite easy. Yeah.
Brilliant. And then maybe, Robbie, if you have a policy angle, or John, if there's anything you'd want to add to that question about access to technology.
I think it's a tricky. I think as Renee says, that a lot of the kind of digital divide we think about, I don't know if that's as present in terms of accessing the internet and online portals as perhaps it used to be. But where it might rear up is, I think, in expectations around young apprentices, and if they're in, again, smaller organisations where there might be a level of technological buy-in they're supposed to have. Are there tools or subscriptions or devices that they're expected to be putting towards? That's something that I think could be a barrier to longer term retention. So making sure that they're supported with any kind of level of technological buy-in that's required at the organisation would be important there. But yeah, I'm not aware of any strong evidence on the role of technology in terms of accessing apprenticeships.
Bro, just one quick one to add. I'm going to flip the question slightly, but we're talking about physical tech there. If you think about tech in terms of AI, and this is just a watch point more than anything, but one trend we're really starting to see as an employer is almost cut and paste examples of an application from ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So it's a real risk for students that they become lazy and they're applying for roles on the strength of what does a good application look like. We've got scanners that will spot that. We've got humans that will spot that type of stuff. So the pushback is almost to education, just to make sure this is a real watch point.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And that's potentially the next the next topic of our future webinar series. Apologies. So last question. It's quite a long one, but I'll try and get this one in. So mentoring is a type of support that is regularly raised by disadvantaged students. Finding senior leaders to volunteer for these types of initiatives can be difficult due to their availability and workload. Therefore, I'm trying to put together a business case for the early careers team to implement and manage a mentoring style program for disadvantaged applicants and offer holders. Do you have any advice on how a small team can implement initiative of this nature, and what sort of content should a short-term mentoring program include to ensure impact, technical skills, soft skills, career coaching and development, transition from school to workforce? So I'll hand that over to John and Robbie. Then maybe we'll ask some of the panel if they've had any experience with mentoring.
Yeah, I'll give a quick 30 seconds. I'm just conscious of time, and we're not going to crack it right now. But Michael, what we will do, Michael, if this is okay, we do something of a Tuesday called Tuesdays on Toast. So it's like a little breakfast meeting, 8 to 9. It's open to all. If Mel, with your blessing, if we can perhaps share the link to that after the session. I'd suggest just come along and have a little bit of a chat about it, and we could talk at a little bit more length about some of the things that we can do. And we have mentoring programs. We tend to use our own talent alumni to be the mentors, if you like, back to the point I was making earlier about being able to be what you see. But yeah, if we can share that link afterwards, Mel, I think that might give a bit more meat on the bones for Michael.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you say, it's a great question, and obviously I don't think I can share any experiences of partners that have got it nailed. I think everyone does kind of little bits. I think the main priority is the safeguarding piece, which can be problematic, but can definitely be overcome. And I think just having someone in the organisation that can give insights into the sort of commercial awareness side of it, as well as then the application, is really key. So I think that's probably almost a topic that we can pick up at another time. Really conscious of everyone's time, and I know everyone in this space at the moment is super busy. So I just wanted to, first of all, give a huge thanks to those that have given up their time to attend today, but moreover those that have spoke as Robbie on the keynote speaker. John, thank you so much for giving your insights from Lloyds Banking Group and the 3 apprentices. I mean, I think in itself, the fact that at 18, 19, 20, you're prepared to join in with the webinar is kind of proof of the amazing impact these apprenticeships can have in terms of shooting these amazing talented young people into their careers. I definitely don't think I would have been in a position to do that at that age. So thank you for your valuable insights and your willingness to share your experiences. We obviously haven't even touched on the idea of retaining and onboarding apprentices. That's definitely for another time. But some key takeaways from me really are that sort of early interaction and outreach piece for sure. How we can sort of potentially tweak our application and recruitment processes to try and be as open and accessible as possible. And as you say, it's not, the conversion rates are so small from application to success, but it is trying to see the bigger picture that, even if they're not successful with you, they could be successful with another employer, in their 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th application. So the work that you do will still be invaluable to every, young person. Just going to quickly hand over to Jared just to close out, but a huge thank you again for joining, and we'll sort of follow up with some sort of key headlines and the links and so on, and the recording for you to look at in your own time. Thanks, Jared.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. And just echoing what Mel said, real thank you to everyone who took the time to join us, and thank you for the insightful keynote from Robbie and our fabulous panel, John, David, Renee and Glory, for your wonderful contributions today. As Mel said, I'm Jared, Senior Business Development Manager at Uptree. And I think if there's one sort of takeaway, as you can see on the screen, an apprenticeship is more than a job, it's a passport to a career. It can level the playing field, ensuring that talent is the primary currency of the UK workforce. I think that as well, there's lots to take away from them. We will be following up, but the risk is that apprenticeships become another route for advantage, those that are already advantaged. The opportunity is really, we're all here to make them a genuine pathway for underrepresented students, but that takes deliberate and intentional design. And that's where we we come in at Uptree, we work with employers to connect with students from under-resourced schools and sixth forms, really get there before they apply, and really kind of build that awareness, confidence and readiness from outreach into schools to employer-hosted experience, such as in-person and virtual. If something's really resonated today, let's explore how we can build and evolve your attraction to students. Even like a short conversation could spark an approach tailored to your region, your social impact goals, or your early career strategy. Just once again, thank you everyone for your time and energy. We'll be sending out a follow-up of the recording so you can rewatch and share any highlights with any colleagues. And I'm really genuinely looking forward to see how we can kind of build this conversation into us moving forward. And then on the next slide is just our logo graph of all the current employers partners. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.